Hello, I'm Li Hao. Welcome back. We've been building client-side routing library in Svelte in the past videos. If this is the first video you're watching, well, I've included the link to the whole playlist, all the previous videos in the description, so you can watch them first. A quick preview of what we have done so far. We have created a client-side library, client-side routing library that matches the routes and also intercepts all the click events on your link so that when you navigate around, it does client-side routing rather than a browser navigation. And we've come such a long way where we have lazy loading the components as well as dynamic routes matching. In the last video in particular, we've managed to update the components rather than destroy and recreate a component when we navigate to a new route that matches to the same component. So we only change the props that we pass in so that we don't destroy the component and recreate a new one. And in that video, we also kind of preview what we're going to talk about in this video, which is parameters matching, right? Over here, if you look at the examples that I showed you in the last video, if you navigate to routes like item ASDF 007, the shop ID is ASDF, which is an invalid parameter, right? We want to do some validation or matching of the parameter so that it matches a certain pattern, not just matching anything. And also, if you come over here, if we see I type 007 like this, then the shop ID is 7777. This is a different class of problems, slightly different from the one that we saw just now, but because this itself should not be matched to our routes in the first place. We only specify in our routes definition that we only want 2 sections after the item, so you should have 2 sections rather than 3. So this should not match our routes in the first place. And this video, we're gonna just figure out all of this and tidy up in this video. Sorry to jump in, but I got an important thing to tell you, which is that if you're following along, coding along with me, the code for all this is on the GitHub repo. Link in the description. Just follow along. If you miss any steps, each changes are in individual commits. So you can just check out that commit and take a look at what you are missing. Now follow along. So the first thing I noticed here in our routes is that now our routes TypeScript definition is complaining because params is a required field now. I'm just gonna fill that up. Don't worry about it because eventually we're gonna do a file-based routing. So all this code that you see is not gonna be written by humans, right? You don't have to write this and then params with the empty array. We don't have to default it to something because all this is generated by the file-based router later on. So we can write as unhuman-friendly kind of parameters as we want for now, but the easiest to execute for now because all this heavy lifting of writing this will be done by our script later on in the file-based routing. So here, first thing we need to solve is that this should not be matched to a route, right? You should not have a parameters that has a slash in the middle of it. So we need to change our regular expressions a bit. So if I come over here to one of my usually frequent regular expressions, regular expression playground, let's paste my regular expressions in here. I always come over here to verify my regular expressions. I'm not sponsored for this, it's just my personal preference. This shows me the groups, capturing groups, that it has 2 groups and capture, the first group capture 007 like this and second group capture like this, which is, we should not capture the slash, right? So we can change this, right? The dot matches any character. We can change this to something else to say maybe not anything but not the slash. Then this matches only 007 and we should copy this as well over here. So now this route wasn't matched. It's not being matched at all because this contains 3 sections and it's not what we are looking for. If I delete this, then this will match 2 sections. This does not. 1 section does not. Yeah. So this is a more valid regular expressions. Actually, also this should match as well, I feel, because it's not quite different, right? This kind of can be optional if you really want to. I'm not really sure what's the behavior of this, but I think this can be an optional thing. So we can have an optional value over here. So it question mark says that the previous character is optional, so we can have it or not. We still match the routes, and the group still be the same where it's 007. So let's update our regular expression this way. Let's see, paste it in here. So this has to update it with this now. And of course this one, optional slash at the end. So here we have this as well in all our URL regular expressions. So let's come back. Now this is not found, not matching. Now this matches, right? So we've improved our regular expressions. Yay! So next thing we need to do is that we need to have a way that this does not match, or rather we can have another route that matches. This is gonna call a haha route that matches. Whoops. Let's try to refresh this again. So we want that this route, when it validates the parameters, right? If the parameter shop ID is not numeric, then it should not match the item routes. It should leave to the next routes to match it, right? If it's fully numeric, all numbers, then yeah, go ahead. So in our parameters, we not just want to capture them, we also need to check whether it follows a certain patterns, right? We want to match the parameters. We want to test the parameters one more time before we fully say that this route is being matched, right? So we're going to define that over here like this. Let me just format this nicely. Right, so we have our parameters. I think the next thing we want to have is called a param matching, which is an array. And here we want to have a function that takes in the parameters param, or rather the shop ID, and we're gonna check whether shop ID matches just numbers, right? Because start with and end with numbers.test shop ID. So we want to have this function to validate it, right? Why is it a function but not a regular expression? Well, if it's a function, we actually can be more, we can allow the user to actually write any kind of function to do the matching, right? So it's not as restrictive as this where in our case of like matching the routes, we are very clear that we match the routes on a certain pattern. But in parameters, this can be anything, right? It can be a shop ID that starts with, that's maybe greater than 500, or maybe starts with 1, 2 in the shop ID. It can be anything that does not have to be related to just matching the characters itself. It can be a meaning of the characters, right? The shop ID value is, say, it's an even number, or it's an odd number, or it's a special shop or something like that. Then that we can have more freedom for the user to write this matching, right? So here, and also if you take a look at svelte-kit docs, that's what they do in parameters matching as well, which is copy them, right? So anyway, let's come over here. Param matching, we have our validation function. This should return us a boolean. Of course, this gives us warning in TypeScript. We need to define it. So let's go there. Let's go here and define param matching. I think we should have an S over here. Params matching is equals to an array, right? An array of functions. Function that takes in a string, param as a string, and returns boolean. Right, so it's an array, parameters takes in a string and returns boolean, and of course, everyone else has to specify this, whether or not they have it or not. Just make it easy. I'm just gonna return like this, and this one. So if it matches, so if you have two parameters, then you probably have two matching, params matching function, right? In this case, I want to return undefined because I'm going to specify undefined, or maybe just ignore it entirely. Or I can specify undefined over here so that it checks item ID only rather than a shop ID. Right? Something like that. I can do that as well. So my point is that if I don't have a specific matching function, then I'm going to just leave it as undefined. So in this case, it's undefined. I don't have the shop ID matching parameter. So I need to, in my code later on, I need to be smart that if it's undefined, I don't call it. If it's a function, then I call and have to make sure that it returns true, such that it has to return true for these routes or these parameters to match. So let's do that. Let's go to our code and see how we can write that. So this is in our routes matching logic. We look through all the routes and we match. We check whether this matches, and if it matches the URL, capture the group, then we loop through the list of parameters, we capture the group, right? And here we try to build the parameters and then we assign it and then it says it's match. But here at the same time, we also want to check whether if the parameters that we're going through have the matching function, right, which is the route.params matching, if the function itself at the position of I, which is the parameters that we're looking at, right? So here, shop ID is the first item, first function. Item ID is the second item, then second function, right? Like this. I'm gonna get this function, and if it's a function, if it's something, right, type of, if it's a function, right, then we're gonna call it. Actually, we don't really, and we might not really need this checking because these routes will be generated by our file-based routing later on. Then of course, if it's defined, then it's definitely a function. We trust it, but for now, just have this for now. And check this, and then if it's function, then we call this with the current parameters, right, which is this one. If this returns false, then we want to skip all this and continue our routes matching, right? So we need to continue our routes matching. So if I do continue over here, it continues this for loop, right? It's not what I want. I want to continue this outer match routing for loop. So I'm going to add a label. This is the match routing for loop, and I'm going to continue that loop instead. So I'm going to say here like this. This is our label statement, just like your special reactive declaration. It's kind of similar. It's the same syntax, but it does very different things because Svelte compilers treat it differently, specially, right? But here is just a normal JavaScript. We have our label match routing and just continue that loop, right? And if you look at this code, you realize that we repeat ourselves quite a lot. We have this over here written twice, this over here written twice. So we're gonna do some cleaning up a bit. Gonna say this is the param matching function, right? Just gonna replace this, and this one is the param. Const param equals this one, right? So if the param matching function is a function, then try run. If it returns false, then we're going to continue our route matching. route matching, route matching. Yeah, this is a bit route matching. Continue our route matching. Which means skip all this. It's still not found. We skip all this, right? And we continue matching our routes. And if it matches, if it returns true, then of course this does not go through, then we continue building our parameters, right? So let's take a look over here. Immediately you see that our URL has updated. If I go try to visit item ASDF like this, it goes to the haha, right? If I go to like this, then wait, it still goes to haha. That's incorrect. Something wrong with our match function. Are we returning? Hold on, let's take a look. We should be matching 777 with this regular expression. Is it wrong? It does match. It tests and then it returns this value. So let's take a look at what it returns. So console log param and the value is this one. Let's take a look what goes wrong. Our param is the name. Okay. It should be the match, the value. Okay, so this should be the name. Let's rename this to be param name. And then param value should be this one. So we are actually gonna call this with the param value instead. Save this. And now we are at item 777, right? We are at the right component. If I change this to ASDF, then it's at the haha, right? It's a different component that does not have any params matching, right? It's a fallback, right? So if I don't have this route, if I save this, refresh, then of course div list, okay, this should fall through all the way to something else. Why is it item? Let's see. Oh no, let's see. I think let's see, our match component match routes. Okay, I have a feeling that our current component is undefined or something else. Console log this one. Let's save and run. Component is undefined. So and the match route is, wait, we match something. That is wrong. Match routes component. Okay, so this comes too early. We shouldn't do this because later on we still do some checking. So here we only pass through everything. Only go checking through all the parameter fetching. Only here we set the match routes and match routes parameters, right? So here this gives us a 44 not found, right? It couldn't match anything because it does match the URL pattern of this, but the params matching is wrong. If I go 777, then it's correct. It matches. If I do this, it's not found again. If I try to add back this routes, this matches the same URL pattern but does not have any route parameters matching. Then if I try to go to something else, then it falls into this haha route. So go back and forth, right? So we have our parameters matching done, and I think that's almost, we are getting really close. But there's one thing I want to add to our dynamics routes matching before we say that we pat ourselves back that our dynamic routes matching is fully complete, right? So one thing that is possible in svelte-kit, where this routing library gets inspiration from, is you can do a rest parameters, right? You can write something like shop and then say 3 dots with say shop something, right? Then this something is actually an array, and you can go however many deep of this URLs over here, like shop. You can match to shop 1, shop 1 2, shop 1 2 3, shop 1 2 3 4. You get the idea. And this is what we're gonna do in the next video, which is the REST parameters matching. So remember to subscribe so that you get notified when the next one is out. So see ya, bye bye.